digressing, just to conclude this idea of the Greco-Roman, the Norse, and the cabalistic parallels between, again, this descent of the undifferentiated totality, the singularity or source of oneness, into that of, firstly, timely will, the first primordial structures, the prima materia, and then into the full enclosure of material involution and the hierarchy. And the division of the elements, the division of seasons, the division of being. And I just want to also mention as well, if we look at Judaism and Kabbalah, now I have stated, Kabbalah, in fact, is more than just mere dualism. But the way that the Odyssey comment framed it was that I was unwittingly supporting this notion of God versus the devil, and of course that's how they control us. Complete oversimplification, by the way. It's far more nuanced than that. As I mentioned, in Kabbalah there's about 4 different components. There are more than that if you factor in the 4 worlds of Kabbalah and all of the various emanations of this Ein Sof hour throughout all of them. You start to get into, a multiplicity, very similar, of course, to Gnosticism and the structures of the Aeons and then the Archons and all of the other powers and principalities throughout the various Gnostic cosmologies. It starts to get convoluted, and of course it's quite nuanced, but Yahweh is Satan. I don't believe I created this paradigm, this dualistic paradigm. In fact, actually what I posited was the Gnostic idea, which I think makes the most sense in terms of, and I mean the broad Gnostic idea, that the Old Testament deity is in fact the god of this world, Satan. Ha-Shaitan, the adversary. That is what I was positing in that book. If he picked up on something that was completely contrary to that, again, which is an oversimplification of what I stated in the book, then I'm sorry to say you're either functionally illiterate or you didn't quite read the book to the end. Then it becomes very clear, especially in the Aleph and Tav eclipse sections, of the theurgical and theogonic model that I'm positing. Which, by the way, I think I was fairly plain with it, even right back at the introduction. My idea is that Yahweh is the god of this world. I have to agree with Abrahamism in that respect, and of course Yahweh as an archetype is Saturnine, in its primacy at least. What we're seeing with Yahweh, or Yah, or Ea, or Enki, or, pick any one really, is ultimately a destructive aspect, a capricious aspect, the Lord of this world, the God of this world. This world was conceived in death and destruction and chaos. Hence, of course, the Gnostics called this deity, this Lord of the world, Yalda Bahut, Yalda Baoth, which is the child of chaos, or it could be an abbreviation of Yahweh Seviot, or Yahweh Sabaoth, Yahweh the Lord of the hosts, right? The Lord of heaven, which again encompasses the same idea that he is all of the planetary archetypes. But of course, Saturn, in the classical cosmological system, was the final planet. He was the patient one. So therefore, he was the one who sat upon the black throne of heaven, which is of course what we see with Yahweh in Ezekiel's vision, and of course all of the other Merkaba visions of the throne of God. What I'm actually stating is, yes, Yahweh is the God of this world because this world is completely accursed. It was conceived in destruction. It renews itself through destruction. We are subsumed at the end of our mortal existence by destruction. We cyclically go through these periods of destructions. Now again, I don't mean to be pessimistic. That is just a plain self-evident fact of existing within this world. It's conceived in death and destruction. Again, the first stage of the great work, the magnum opus, is putrefaction. That is a compound Latin word, which of course has found its way into English, because it's a loan word. It is made up of two words in Latin: putra, decay; factio, to make. It's the same as Boaz and Yakin. Boaz, strength, relating to energy, severity, the Shakti, force, that which shakes up the world to ensure that stagnancy doesn't introduce itself into the world and destroy the world. And then, of course, which is Yakin, which is to establish. You see the same thing in Kabbalah. You have Bina, understanding or severity, and Hokmah, mercy, wisdom. It's the same idea, and of course, how many letters are between the B, the letter B, and the letter J? 7. 7 letters, because 7 is the number of perfection. That is why we have the 3 of the Shin and the 4 of the Shin, which are in the Zohar, well, not necessarily prophesized, but they're intimated. What's conveyed regarding them, the 3-pronged Shin and the 4-pronged Shin, which are the names, according to 2 Kings 21:7, the names of the Lord which are etched into Jerusalem, or the name of the Lord, rather, which is etched into Jerusalem. The 3 relates to this world. The 4 relates to the world to come. The 2 together establish the 7, which is the material and immaterial. It is the synthesis of the 2, and the hypostasis of the 2, simultaneously. So that's ultimately what you're seeing with Yahweh. Yahweh is not the true God. He's not the God that is unknowable, the ineffable God, the autonomous, slumbering, and involuntary dreamer. He who is the absolute reality, who is the universal soul. That is not Yahweh, but Yahweh is of that universal soul, as are we. And what appears to be the case from this world, from my observations and from my study, is that the secret of the faith is that Gnosticism pretty much gets it correct with the cosmology of this world. And the secret of the faith, as is mentioned in the Zohar, is that we are entrapped in this world. We are both capricious like Yahweh himself. We are of both the material and the immaterial. But the immaterial essence of us, well, not necessarily of us, but of the universal soul, of the absolute, of the true God, is hidden within us, is a dimmed light that must be kindled via our experiences. Experiences, of course, and experience comes from the Latin perere, which means to put to the test. So this essence, this fragment of God that resides within us as an immanence, an ineffable, unknowable immanence that is boundless, that which is ultimately the true essence of mankind, the true essence of our humanity. It is that which is hidden in the glacial code of matter. It is that which is put to the test within the material world, and from that test shall it know itself. From running the gauntlet shall it find itself. From the rough comes the diamond. We merely have to burnish it with our experiences, with the ignition of the primal fire, once again, the rekindling of it. Ultimately, that's what you're seeing there with everything. Kabbalah, Gnosticism. See, the distinction between Kabbalah and what I necessarily see within the world is that I want to get back beyond this world to the divine, to God. That is why I do all of this. I want to know myself, because to know myself is to know the world, and is thus to know the divina mens, the divine mind. The noumenon, which is omnipresent, present in all things, in both the seen and unseen, the felt and that which is concealed to our senses. It is the animistic essence of all things, which is beyond the purely phenomenal world. It exists beyond the periphery of sight. But nonetheless, it is discoverable if one tries hard enough. That is what I'm looking to garner, to gain a theosis with. It is that which I believe the archetype of Christ embodied and signified and symbolised. And of course that is a universal archetype. It's been around since time immemorial. It is an infinite light, the salve to remedy all wounds. However, the cabalistic idea of this all is ultimately tied up with a control of the material. The tower. They will not stop, they are relentless. What they desire is the colonization of heaven and earth, and they will stop at nothing less than that. So just quickly to conclude this, so the Greek progression, from boundlessness to establish order, we went through Uranos, or Kalos. The boundless primordial being represents the earliest, most undifferentiated totality of the cosmos, the oneness, essence, singularity, before the explicit form or limit. He is boundless sky, pure potential, the inertia of being. This is the Empyrean in its most abstract, limitless form. That links, of course, to Ymir and then the Ein Sof. Saturn, Kronos, the imposition of timely will and structure, overthrows Uranos, inaugurating the era of timely will. He embodies the initial act of will's infraction, stirring paradox and imposing the first primordial structures, time and boundaries upon the boundless. He is the warden and the stern choreographer, the director of the play, who begins to craft the blueprint of the cosmos. That, of course, links to the Keter, and it links to Keter Hokmah Bina. The Uranos, of course, links with Ein Sof Hour, again the Trinity of Trinities idea. And in the Norse mythos, Saturn would link to Bor, Buri and Bestla, Ymir, Thrugelmir and Bergelmir. That would be Uranos and the Ein Sof Hour. So those Trinity of Trinities. And then we're getting to Zeus, or Jupiter, the enclosure of material involution and hierarchy. Overthrows Saturn, solidifying the enclosure of material involution. His reign brings formal laws, explicit hierarchies, and the division of elements, and the division of being, the division of consciousness, the ego, i.e. the seasons, leading to the dense manifestation of the material world. This is the architectural completion of the terrestrial prison. That links, of course, to Odin, Vili, and Ve. And we see that within the cabalistic notion of this all. That would link with Yod, Hesod, and Netza, which would result in the culmination of Malkuth, which is the material kingdom, the material world, the material plane. The Norse parallels creation from primordial substance, Ymir the primordial giant and cosmic substance, parallel to Uranos. Ymir is the primordial giant whose very body is the substance of the cosmos. From his corpse the world is created. He represents the raw and differentiated prima materia, the vast formless potential that exists before creation. He is the chaotic lake from which all emerges. Like Uranos, he is the boundless origin, but more explicitly as the physical stuff of the universe. Buri, the ancestral will and first differentiation, parallel to early Kronos Saturn. Buri is the first being licked from ice by a cow. We'll get into what that means. The cow is obviously Autumla. Bor is his son who fathers Odin, Vili, and Ve. They represent the first stirrings of will and differentiation. from the primordial substance Ymir. Obviously, this culminates in Bestla, Bor's wife. So Bor's wife is that union, quite literally. That's what Bestla means in the Norse language. So this union creates the next phase of this all, which is the Jupiterian or Zeus phase, the phase of the foundation, which is the Yod. Continuing on, so like Uranus, he is the boundless origin. Oh, excuse me, I've already read that. They are the ancestral forces that begin to impose order and give rise to consciousness, akin to Kronos establishing the first structured age after the boundless primordial, and then on to Odin, and of course Vili and Ve as well, the architect of the new order and embodiment of Gnosis. Parallel to Jupiter, Zeus, Odin, along with his brothers Vili and Ve, slays Ymir and creates the world, the Midgard, the Middle Earth, and from Ymir's body, he establishes the new cosmic order, laws and hierarchies in Asgard. And by the way, Asgard, I believe, if I recall correctly, was built on a hill or a mountain. So, again, it's the same idea as El Shaddai, or El Shaddai, or Bel Shaddai, the Lord or God who dwells on the mountain. He is the chief god of the Aesir. The Aesir, by the way, also may link to the Asuras, the children of the dawn, but we'll get into that. In fact, I'll get into that in another book, because it goes into the Olympians, it goes into all of this, it goes into Lucifer, it goes into what the hell that they are worshipping, ultimately, and what they revere, and what the archetype, essentially, that they're looking towards to redeem them from the fallen state of the world. Similar to Jupiter's supreme rule. So he is the embodiment of Gnosis. Odin famously sacrifices an eye for wisdom, drinking from Mimir's well, and hangs himself on Yggdrasil, the world tree, to gain knowledge of the runes. This makes him a profound symbol of Gnosis and the highest duty to know ourselves, as he actively seeks understanding through self-sacrifice and confrontation with suffering. He is the Hierophant of the Norse cosmos. The Hierophant is quite literally from the Greek, the revealer of the sacred. Now, interestingly, he gives up his eye for wisdom. So he becomes the one-eyed king. Now, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. And wisdom is something that is, of course, he drinks from Mimir as well. Now, Mimir is interesting. His name etymologically derives from a Proto-Indo-European root, which means to think or to recall. Similar, of course, to memetics or memory, or even the mem, which is the 13th letter. And that 13th, of course, links with the centre, the Ophiuchus, the serpent bearer, the centre, the 13th sign, the centre of the zodiac. So it's that idea of the paradox, the stirring of paradox, which differentiates the undifferentiated totality of the prima materia, of Uranus or Ymir, or this unconsciousness of being, the primordial being, the boundless, into something that has boundaries. So it is that imposition of negation which creates and fashions the determinate, and again the boundaries from the boundless. So yes, so the wisdom itself is liquid because it's contained in Mimir as well. He is the most he's the wisest of all the tribe of the Aesir. Now, the wisdom itself, in essence, as we see from Kabbalah and even alchemy and other mystery religions, of which there are primarily 7 in number, which of course we see from Morals and Dogma, and also from some of Manly P. Hall's work. They intimate this. Now, wisdom is essentially the current which maintains the flow within the cosmic river, which keeps man adrift within that cosmic river. Remember, The banks, of course, they control the liquidity, the currency. Again, this is all maritime terminology. The banks are on each side of the river, which steers the path of the river. We are, of course, fertilized from semen. The semen are, of course, like these little serpentine fish, you could say, right? Now, the semen, of course, sounds uncannily like seamen, which is S-E-A-M-E-N. So we are like seamen adrift within the ocean or the river's currents, right? Again, this is all of the entirety of the English language almost has is encoded with these plays on words, which ultimately harken back to this Gnostic view of the world. Because the English, well, at least modern English, it was engineered to, of course, reflect this ritualistic, these ritualistic connotations. That was done by Shakespeare, or at least whoever Shakespeare was. Now, interestingly as well, what we can see from Odin famously sacrificing his eye for wisdom, this idea of self-sacrifice and confrontation with one's shadow, again going through that suffering and individuating oneself or gaining something, some sort of knowledge or wisdom or information that appertains to one's journey, a spiritual journey that is. Interestingly, that also links with what's going on within the great magnum opus, the literal Great Reset, the putrefaction of the entirety of the system, at least within the West, so that the East will win. What does that mean? I mean, we read of that in Morals and Dogma as well. What does that mean? The East shall win. The East will best the West. The East shall gain victory over the West. Well, ultimately what it means is that the sun shall set, of course, in the West, and the East, meaning the continuation of these cycles, will perpetuate. The soul trap will perpetuate. It will be perfected in this time to come. How? Because the wisdom will be drunk from the well by the system. They will sacrifice their eye, or they will, in essence, sacrifice the system itself. They will engage in a great reset, a profound self-reflection, a confrontation with the dark winter, right? A dark night of the soul shall ensue, and from that they will gain the knowledge of the runes. What does that mean? Well, the rune is from Old English. It means the secret, the mystery. It could even mean counsel, but it typically means the secret or the mystery from Old English. They will gain the secret of the mysteries. They will be able to create a phantom matrix, a metaverse, if you will. And moreover as well, this shall be done from the ruin of this world. Do you see how this is working? The secret is hidden within the ashes. That's why the phoenix rises from the ashes. And moreover as well, the phoenix links with the Egyptian Sothic cycle. It also links with the great year. So it isn't in fact just a bird. The bird is merely a symbol. It is this symbol of the epochal shift, which is of course written in the stars as well. The Sothic cycle. Sothic means this idea of Sirius, the cycle of Sirius, which was associated with the Egyptian calendar. The heliacal rising of Sirius was, again, on the east, interestingly, right? The heliacal rising of Sirius, what it means is that every year Sirius would rise with the sun. Again, the heliacal rising on the east. That would be the indicator of the Egyptian calendar system, and of course in the Kemetic civilization, the ancient Egyptian civilization, and in those days of antiquity, the heliacal rising of Sirius was associated with the flooding of the Nile, so hence the significance. But the Sothic cycle is typically a 49-year cycle. The Sothic cycle is also the orbital cycle of Sirius A around Sirius B. Again, the twins of Sirius, right? Just like we have a twin essence in man, so does Yahweh. He's capricious, he has a twin essence. He's mercurial, meaning he's, bipolar. He's sometimes good, sometimes extremely bad. We exist on that polarity. That, of course, is symbolised by the Sothic cycle, the sine and the cosine. Now, that is a 49-year cycle, typically. In fact, you can actually see it with the tower. So they tried to get rid of those towers in NYC in 1993. That was, I believe, the year of the beginning of the Sothic cycle. They failed miserably, so they had to wait another 7 years to thus engage in that again, obviously in 2001, to retry it. Now, that's the gateway year for the Sothic cycle. It was meant to be 1993. All of this was to be wrapped up by 2044, 2043, which is the 7x7 year cycle, again the 49-year cycle. In both Judaism and Kabbalah, this is known as the Yovel cycle. We know it as the Jubilee year. That's made up of 7 sabbatical cycles, 7 sabbatical years. So 7x7 years. It's also known as 7 Shemitah years, right? The Shemitah. Now, really what you're seeing with the Great Reset is the Egyptian Sothic cycle. Not necessarily the heliacal rising of Sirius, but of the Sothic cycle of Sirius A and Sirius B, the orbital pattern of that, which takes 49 years. This entire cycle, this grand Sothic cycle, by the way, I've already made a video on this. You'll probably want to check that out. That will end in 2050. That's why the agendas really don't go beyond 2050. The main UN agendas end in 2050, bar of course Agenda 21, which is the entire 21st century. But the specific agendas end in 2050 for that reason. Because from 2001 to 2050 is 49 years. If the towers collapsed in 1993, that would have, of course, signalled the end after the passage of 49 years in 2043, 2044. They needed to wait 7 years because, according to the Zohar, there has to be a blood moon tetrad on the ending of this sort of, this cycle, this transitionary period. The blood moon tetrad is the year that you have 4 blood moons in. Now, those will occur in 2043, 2044, and 2049, 2050, right? Do you see the significance? All of this is really, it's lined up with mathematical precision. They leave nothing amiss, nothing to fate or chance. In fact, they are fate. They are the threaders of fate, and their minds are the loom of destiny. That is how they see this system. In fact, they believe this system is already theirs. This is the idea even of the Internet of all things. They want to create a phantom matrix. They want to become, quite literally, the demiurge, the phoenix which rises from the ashes, to become masters of us all. Now, there's far more to all of this. You'll probably want, on the phoenix, you'll want to read the Gnostic manuscript, which is on the origin of the world. It's part of the Nag Hammadi library. Now, who knows if the Nag Hammadi library is actually authentic, but nonetheless, there's some interesting things mentioned in that, which is typically dated from the 4th century AD, regarding both Sophia, Zo, which is of course life, that appears in the iPet Goat 2. It's hidden. You'll see it right at the beginning. If you look at when Bush is in the classroom to the right, you'll see the alphabet Z-O-E are in fact lined up. They're beside each other, and those letters in that alphabet sequence are skewed, right, to obviously bring one's attention to that Z-O-E. You'll notice that the alphabetical sequence begins on E. The reason for that is it is the fifth letter. The fifth letter of the English or Latin alphabet. The 5 relates to the Fool and Orion. That's the beginning of the 22 letters that you see from E to Z. The 22, of course, links with the 22 tarot cards, the 22 Splendor Solace plates, the Splendor of the Sun. We'll get into what this means, by the way. This also links with Eos or Zoe reversed that we're seeing here. But the 5 also links with the pentacle, or as we see under Bush, the inverted pentagram, which is man in his fallen state. You see the same thing with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern when they join the play unwittingly. Though there is a degree of choice, they do foist themselves into this. And that is an entire metaphor for man foisting himself into spiritual involution, into entombing his soul within matter itself. That is what the pentagram ultimately refers to, and the perpetuation of the soul trap. That's why it's linked to Satanism. However, when they join the troupe of actors within the meta-theatre of Hamlet, of the play, and eventually, of course, die at the end in this weird time warp, this recurring meta-theatre, they were flipping completely improbable odds, but they kept on flipping before they joined the play and became actors, similar to how we are. They kept flipping heads up, tails down on the coin, the gold coin. The gold coin is essentially the expression of one's will, which is of course expressed through action, hence the flipping. However, when they joined the act, the stage performance, became an actor, they flipped the coin one last time. It was heads down, tails up. You see the same thing with the Hanged Man and the Tower Tarot card. That is man literally in spiritual involution. The reason for this is that we are effectively food for the gods. I'll get into this in another video. It's an extremely important concept to realise, and it's a reason I keep going into all of these esoteric topics in absolutely abstruse detail, because what is about to come down the pipe, this grand harvest of the ages, which is cyclical, these resets are cyclical. By the way, it's linked with the Eos and Zoe. Eos, by the way, is the Hellenic goddess of the dawn, similar to the German Eostra, linking, of course, as well with Astarte and Ishtar, the star. See the Star Tarot card for the sort of illustrative metaphor of all of this, but ultimately what it's generally conveying with the dawn and, of course, with the Star Tarot card is this idea of the rotundity, the cyclicality, the recursiveness of you die in the world. The 4 elements that have confined you to this world, Yod He Vahe, the Tetragrammaton, hence why the Z, the 26th letter, the Hebrew gematria value of the Tetragrammaton of Yod He Vahe is 26. That is the terminus point, right? He is the gatekeeper. He is the pinnacle of the capstone, the edge of the simulation. Once you hit that point, you believe you're at the end, you're not. It's merely another illusion, and he will send you right back to the beginning, to become the fool yet again, to fall over the precipice, to become Ryan, the headless dreamer, the headless god, to be foisted on to the Eridanus, similar to Osiris, which is of course seen within the E, the fifth letter. But you'll notice this is further exemplified in the fact that when Bush sits down and really thinks, he thinks long and hard about what he's about to say, and he forgets his lines. He messes it up. What were the lines? Fool me once, fool me once, fool me once. I think he mentions it 3 times, if I recall. Now that's important due to the Trinity. The descent of the unconsciousness of being goes through, firstly, consciousness, the murmurings of consciousness, which differentiate the potential in its most basic form. And then you have, it's similar to the prism, if you will, then you will have that of the will, which is expressed through action. Then you will have the differentiation, fully, the enclosure, the paradise, the Paradesh, the Eden, essentially the enclosure of man in the vessel itself, the differentiation of being, where oneness fully becomes the many. All of these concepts, I mean, honestly, if you're watching these videos, take notes. So you understand the general, you only have to understand these concepts generally, just the basic parameters of them, to generally understand what's going on in your local environment, what's going on with the government and their policies, which seem absolutely mad. They're not mad, they're preparing for a harvest. They're sharpening the sickle to perpetuate the cycles. Cycle. Right, the Father of Time carries the sickle, the crescent of the moon, the seedway of the souls. All of these ideas are tied up with that notion of the dawn, of the Eos. Ultimately, every religion known to man worships the sun at its point of renewal, at its resurrection. It will go through its sojourn into the underworld after, of course, night falls, or of course, twilight, the dark winter. This is why Biden always mentioned the dark winter. So you go through the dark night of the soul, the dark night of the SOL, right? Which is Latin for the sun. And it circles back around to fight against a pep. You use Set, which is the necessary evil, within the Ra Set, the sun, and of course its shadow. The shadow of the sun, Set, fights and beats back the necessary chaos, beats back the primordial dissolution of all things, which is obviously symbolized as a pep. This is how it's seen within that of the Egyptian mythology. Within the Hellenic mythology, it's seen as Typhon. Within the Hebrew mythology, it's seen as Leviathan. And you beat that back. You spear it. This is why, of course, we had William Shakespeare, right? You shake a spear at that chaos, meaning, again, like the tip of the spear, the triangle, the generative symbol. You shake a spear at it, meaning ordo ab chao. You create order from the chaos. Set, controlled chaos. Spears a pep, uncontrolled chaos, which the triangular point at the apex of that spear is the symbol of generation. It generates order from the defeating of chaos. From chaos you create order, because order kills chaos. At least, again, cyclically, right? Periodically, seasonally. And then the sun is reborn again. The soul is reborn again to go through the same cycle over and over and over again. The solar cycle, right? The soul R. The R relates to the Hebrew resh, which is the head, in its pictographic or hieroglyphic root. So that is what the resh or the resh is. R-E-S-H. SH. So literally the solar cycle is the soul which is contained in the mind, which is the chalice. It's the upper chamber, it's the heavenly abode, if you will. That goes through these cycles, through the zodiacal belt, right? In spiritual involution. Why? Because through each cycle, the earth is reset, it's Ra-set. And through Grazon, which is a Hebrew word meaning divine will, that's why we see all of this age of reason from the Illuminati and Masonry and all of this, beginning in the Enlightenment era and onwards, even in the Georgia Guidestone. The age of divine will perpetuates itself consistently through what you're seeing, through the tarot deck. The 0 card and the 22nd card are the same, because it's a closed loop. That is what the earth is. It's what all of the ancients knew. It's what Kabbalah, by the way, knows. You read the Zohar, it becomes quite obvious that what we're in is a closed loop. Again, it uses chaos to create order. Ordo ab chaos. So yeah, he sits down, Bush, and he mentions, fool me once, fool me once, fool me once. The Fool, the first of the tarot cards. He who, glimpsing at the sun, glimpsing at the beauty of his own S-O-U-L, or S-O-L, he falls in love with it like Narcissus falls in love with his own reflection, and falls, descends into Hades, into the underworld, into Earth, essentially. We'll get into even the etymology of Earth in other videos. I think I've already discussed that. All of it is tied up in these concepts. It's just a lot of people, they don't take the time to ponder them. So that's what that means, fool me once, fool me once, fool me once, won't get fooled again. And then he ponders that, because he constantly gets fooled. He's in a recursive loop. He's always playing the fool, the dunce. There's also a deeper symbolism to that as well. But he plays the dunce, constantly the fool. The tap dancing actor on the cosmic stage for the benefit of the gods. His soul is being sapped after every incarnative cycle. This is what you see in the new movie Until Dawn. This is exactly the same idea. Eventually you become a Sarkikoi or a Hylic. You become a Wendigo, as we see in Until Dawn, after multiple recursive loops through reincarnation, going round the Monopoly board, if you will, as the loser, believing that if you consistently pass go and collect $200, you'll eventually become one of the winners. When in fact, the only way to win the game is to simply just not play it. It's to say no, like what we see at the end of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead. It's to not play the fool. But yeah, so Eos and Zoe. Oh, by the way, before we get to that, also ask yourself the question, who are you? Most people can't answer it. In fact, while you're in this world, you can't answer it. Why? Because it's a failsafe of the simulacrum, the dream that we're in, the meta-verse, the meta-theatre that we're in. Most people will answer it by either their role, what they do, or they'll try to be very clever and say, well, I'm a human being. Ultimately, that itself is a modern role. The way that we have attached all of these convoluted, even perhaps facile things onto the concept of the human being or man or mankind, all of this. So there's a role that's expected of you, there's actions that are expected of you if you're a human being. Even if you're, in whatever role professionally, or whatever role you may be in as a domestic housewife, a domestic husband, whatever it may be. These are roles, right? We get rolled up in these roles in the whirlwind, in the storm of time. And we are almost beckoned by the roles to express the will, the divine will, the age of Razon, right? Ratzon, or Rason is another way to spell it. The Ra-sun, the son of the sun, literally, the bull calf of the sun god, Bel Marduk. It's the idea of the dawn, right? Recursively resurrecting the sun through the accursed share being harvested each dark winter, each harvest, right? Each sojourn within the underworld of these crops of souls. However, so we're actors. We are beckoned to express the divine will through action. Because we are actors, we act. We are to express that action, express the script through action, through, of course, word, so that we can go from each act to act, and through that we expose the entire narrative and story. But of course this is a closed feedback loop, so we just constantly play the same role over, the same roles really, over and over and over again. If you were really to boil down all of the various professional roles and the interests of man that are either exacted or expressed through those roles, ultimately the interests of man, the instincts of man, the intuitions of man are ultimately all the same. They're all the same because we are ultimately playing a role. We are actors upon a cosmic stage, within a cosmic stage performance. It is meta-theatre as well, right? So it's like a matryoshka doll. That's how the cosmic structure functions. But yeah, he mentions that, he can't quite grasp the meaning. He's forgot his lines, or he's pondering on something. I won't get fooled again. Am I the fool? So he's almost pondering, but then he snaps out of it, and then Obama takes over. Why? Because that is him going through the dawn down to life, the terminus of life, the Z, Yod He Vahe, the four elements which constrict the fifth to the material plane. The grand judger of all things, the divine judgment, the harvester, the father of time, death, the grim reaper, all of this. He destroys him, and then he changes him, he transmutes him into another form, because he's getting, with age comes wisdom, not always, but usually, and he's starting to think, back on his life. But he's still got that veil of amnesia that we all have within this world. We don't know who we are. Who we are is always conflated with what we do, because this world is reactive. This world desires for us to be reactive beings. It desires for us to be actors upon the stage, to play roles and to essentially express mundane emotion so that it can harvest it. This is the idea of Lush. So yeah, that's the reason for it. Also as well in the 22, it also ties in with the love heart, which is the thematic figure or illustration or conceptualization of the entirety of this journey through Ipek Goat 2, which is a journey of the descent of the spirit and escaping of the soul trap, but most people don't really quite grasp that. Anyway, the 22, the front two of the 22, if you flip that around and conjoin the two twos together, you'll get the love heart. Intersperse them even further, you'll get, of course, the fish symbol. The fish links with that of Mercurius in the alchemical tradition. Mercurius is the hidden god. What the hidden god is essentially us, in our involuted state of matter. Again, the fool, the god who doesn't quite realise he is a god. But the 22 in that respect is similar to the dualistic polarity of this world. Again, if you go even further, if you can join the polarities even further, right, the two and the two together, even further intersperse them, So you create a eros gamos, a sacred union, a conjunctio, coincidentia positorum, right? A union of the opposites, of the two and the two, which, by the way, also links with that of the masculine four elements and the feminine four elements, the four elements in general, which you have fire and air, those are the masculine elements, and earth and water, those are the feminine elements. So that's what it's essentially relating to. The love heart is this idea that, well, they are conjoined, yes, but go even further, right? Conjoin the polarities even further, and you will see that the many are, in fact, they all stem from the one. That's ultimately what the heart symbolism means in IPEC Goat 2. A lot of people, by the way, they can't fathom IPEC Goat 2. It's a complete mystery to them. Once you begin to look into all of this symbolism, you understand the hypostasis of this concept of the soul trap. That entire thing becomes almost an open book. In fact, it becomes so much of an open book that it's hard to actually get through all of the symbolism. For example, just this still frame alone that you're seeing has about, I would say, 24 bits of symbolism in it that will begin to become more developed and expressed as the scenes go on. And of course, I don't have enough time to get through all of them. I mean, I'm only, I think I'm about 40 or 50 pages through my IPEC Goat 2 analysis, and I'm only about 20 seconds in or something, right? 20, 30 seconds in, something like that. There's literally so much in that 7-minute long clip that you could dedicate a 300 or 400 page book just on it, just on the symbolism alone, deciphering it. Quite an undertaking, but eventually I'll get to that. Just shows you the Eos and the Zo, and this links with the same idea as live. To live is to be sort of embroiled in evil, because ultimately what is evil is what produces this artificial essence of life, which isn't life. It's temporal, meaning, of course, it's artificial. Something has created this as a mimicry, because in the primordial state of life, we can even feel it ourselves. We can't fathom the idea of ending, of dying, terminus, because it's something that's solely alien to life. And this is what Christ spoke of, right? Eternal life, because ultimately that is what life is. We are infinite beings, hence why the concept of death is so unknown to us. It shouldn't be unknown to us. If you are mortal, why would the concept of death be a complete unknown to you? Why would it be terror-inducing to you? Well, because if you were mortal, you would realise, of course, that you are finite. However, the reason that it strikes terror into us is because our spirits are not finite. They're infinite. But we have been lulled into the fear of thinking that death is the end. Therefore, when the infinite believes itself to meet a finite end, it puts it into a disorientated state. It can't quite understand it. If I'm infinite, even if I understand that subconsciously or implicitly, if I am infinite, why do I exist in a finite state? Why do I have a finite amount of time? Why will I reach the abyss of death? And then there is nothingness. Ultimately, that's one of the many tricks played by the rulers, the principalities of this vivarium, this firmament dome that we exist within, this plane of existence, of materiality. It's one of the little games that they play, is how they extract fear. All fear is basically based on the unknown. The greatest unknown is that of death. To mention as well, Phoenix obviously links with Phoenician. The Phoenix can also mean the flaming bird. That's why the Phoenix bird is also known as Phoenicopteriformes, which you see the Phoenish, the Phoenix, in there as well. It means the flaming bird, but it can also link with the word, I believe it's in Greek, for purple. This links with the colour magenta or purple, which is the red and blue combined, again the Hieros Gamos. And moreover as well, it is the colour, I guess you could say, of Saturn, as well as of the Keter, the crown. Some say it's of spirituality, it's a symbolic colour of spirituality as well. Hence why Phoenicia's called Phoenicia. It's from the Greek word phoenix or phoenix, which literally means either crimson or reddish purple, and that is the Tyrian purple. Phoenicia literally means the land of the purple. Where that derives from is it's essentially where that colour of dye, which is extracted from mollusks, sea snails, found along the Phoenician coast, particularly, in the city of Tyre, and they monopolised this colour, this dye. This is why to be born in the purple, as Byzantine emperors were, was a symbol of nobility, and this dye was highly prized as a commodity in the ancient world because it was so hard to come by. It really was only derived from the city of Tyre and Phoenicia proper, the Tyrian purple. So that's where that comes from. You'll see in the World Tarot card, she also has the Tyrian purple velvet surrounding her within Manly P. Hall's Secret Teaching of All Ages. If you get a really nice copy, they go for about £500 or so, the limited edition ones. Plate 8, the 8th illustration, you will see the sciatic, which is from the ancient Egyptian city of Sais. It was a religious centre. The sciatic Isis, or also known as the veiled Isis, she also wears this Tyrian purple, this reddish purple, this crimson purple. None of this is coincidence. What you're seeing is the perennial persistence of a mystery religion that stems from a singular root. And what we're seeing are the branches of that. And eventually that rotten tree in the edifice of its corrupt temple will bear fruit. And of course that fruit shall be bad. And they shall, like in the Garden of Eden, seek to entice us to eat from that fruit, to become purely of the id. Hence why they want the digital ID. They want ID everywhere, right? They want the id, which is the ID, the id entity, because that's what they want of you. They want you to become a base common denominator, a husk, a clipoth, something that is completely deracinated from their very being, that knows not God, who will never seek to escape this terrestrial prison, and will live purely under the unica semper avis, the ever singular bird of the phoenix. By the way, on the phoenix bird, I think they hid this from the American greats, what was to be the Great Seal of the United States before the one that we got. William Barnton, he provided several, very overt, don't get me wrong, the Great Seal of the United States as we have it today, the present one is completely overtly occultic, but the one that William Barnton developed, I believe in 1791, is an idea to win the contract for it on the the reverse. It was... Oh no, sorry, it was the obverse of it. You have, of course, the male and the female. That itself, we should understand what that means. But you had the pillar, symbol of earth, symbol of Zion, by the way. The literally Sia on the pillar of the barren land. The pillar after the harvest, essentially. Hence why you have the Georgia Guidestones. Georgia's from Georgikos, which is Greek for farm work or harvest. And then right at the top of that pillar, which is the symbol of the earth, made barren, you have that of the... and it's a symbol of Saturn too. You have that of the fire, and then the black phoenix emerging from that fire. What does that mean? Essentially, it's not necessarily echoing, but it's foreshadowing what would occur later on. Remember, America's called the New Atlantis. What happened to Atlantis? Yes, that's right, it was destroyed, and it fell under the sea, it descended into the sea, it was submerged. Right, which is of course what baptism means. I believe links with this idea of being submerged by data or information. The currency, the wisdom of Mimir's well, if, for example, the currency of the river of time. We are completely inundated by digitalism. We are totally lost in a sea of data. We will be submerged by data. AI, depending on how that goes, and of course the digital singularity and how that pans out, may completely submerge us, meaning destroy us, eradicate us, cyclically renew us, and of course that's what's designed to occur. We are the West. We are the martial nation, which is in essence the military wing to put this New World Order into effect, and then after that we are to be completely annihilated, because the sun sets on the west. That is where the sun, the soul, S-O-L and S-O-U-L, again homophones, meaning they have the same pronunciation, that is where the sun goes into its sojourn, its descent into the land of twilight, into the underworld, and it goes through a sojourn, a journey, a temporary journey, until it resurrects like the phoenix. That's what all of this means. So, involution through succession, both sequences depict the systematic involution of the oneness essence from boundless potential, Uranus, Ymir, Ein Sof, into increasingly structured and dense forms. It's the idea of game theory, essentially, as time goes on, organic beings tend towards cooperation. So you tend to get far more complex and structured or dense forms. So the realms created by Jupiter, Odin, and by the way, this ties in with the tower as well, right? You begin as a vertical spiral, and that vertical spiral gets wider and wider and wider and wider. See the Empyrean for this, by the way. Or if you've ever played Skyrim, when you go to Sovngarde and you see the tower of the Orbis, but you see it as a wheel because you're not seeing it from the profile view, but it is in fact a tower of concentric rings, leading up back to the, essentially the Godhead, the ineffable, unknowable dreamer. Of course, once it reaches the densest point, then it contracts back to the source, and the cycle begins anew, continually. So, continuing on, the act of succession, the son overthrowing the father, represents the Hegelian and of course this is seen in the Shivrat HaKalim, which is the breaking of the vessels, which explains how the divine light of the Ein Sof shattered the initial Sephiroth vessels designed to contain it, leading to the creation of a world of chaos and imperfection. Humanity's role, according to this concept, is to participate in the tikkun, the rectification of this world, restoring it to its original harmony. That's the secret of the faith of essentially Abrahamism, All Abrahamism, by the way, both Christianity and Islam and Judaism. And this is also known as the Simsum, the divine contraction. They're all similar concepts, essentially. Yeah, so continuing on, it represents the Hegelian dialectic of thesis, antithesis, synthesis, driving cosmic development. So this concept of the Dark Tower, or the cosmic nexus, we could say on that. Odin's act of creating Midgard from Ymir's body can be seen as the construction of the Dark Tower itself, the central nexus of reality that holds all dimensions together. Again, Yggdrasil, Asgard, the 9 worlds, the Sephiroth. Right. Of course, Odin is the Keter. He is who holds the crown, or of course, the crown of Yggdrasil, which is the leaves, the canopy of the tree, of the tree of life, which is of course known as Etz Haim in Kabbalah, or just simply the Sephirotic tree. That is what holds all of the dimensions, the worlds together. This act of bringing form from primordial chaos is the ultimate act of structuring the soul trap. The paradox of the warden and the liberator. Odin, like Saturn, embodies this paradox. He establishes the laws and structures of the world, the terrestrial prison, but he also actively seeks gnosis through sacrifice, through the continual sacrificing of souls, offering a path to wisdom and liberation from the soul trap's illusions. His wisdom, gained from the abyss, allows him to both create and comprehend the system. And then we get to the play and its choreography. These mythological narratives are themselves scripts within the grand stage performance of cosmo-autognosis. That's cosmic self-knowledge. That is the teleology of the cosmos itself. It's the end outcome of the cosmos. It's why the slumbering, involuntary, ignorant dreamer, if you will, self-reflects into the dream. It's why we have dreams ourselves. It's that we're attempting to defragment the mind and to understand what we have processed, not just within the day, but throughout our entire life and the subconscious itself. So we seek to know ourselves through the self-reflections that we project within our dreams. So they illustrate how the oneness, the ultimate playwright, explores its own unpredictable essence through the dynamic interplay of these archetypal forces, the many, ensuring the continuous cosmically incestuous coital dance of coagulation's lustful importunes with dissolution. So in essence, the Norse myths of Ymir, Bor and Odin provide a powerful parallel narrative to the Greek progression, and of course the cabalistic tradition, which further solidifies the concept of a universal blueprint that guides the involution of spirit into matter and the establishment of cosmic order. This recurring, recursive pattern highlights the inherent dialectical tension within creation, and the ultimate pursuit of gnosis is the means to transcend the soul trap. And just to get to Autumblo and her licking of the salty ice, the rime, to thus uncover the first being of Buri. So the rime or ice, in an emblematic sense, which Buri emerges from, represents the undifferentiated, frozen state of pure potential. Much like the inertia of being, or the singularity, again the still ocean. It is the raw, unformed substance of the cosmos before life or will fully manifests. So Buri, the first being, the ancestral will, this is the idea of Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh's name itself is a descriptor of his own role, similar to Enkidu, similar to any play or stage performance, by the way. It means, Gilgamesh, quite literally, our hero, our ancestor is a hero. So it literally entails this ancestral will. Buri is the first being, the ancestor of the gods, including Odin. He represents the first stirrings of conscious will, individuality and differentiation from the primordial chaos. He is the nascent will that will eventually stir paradox. This parallels Buri as the initial differentiation from Ymir in the Norse progression, and conceptually the very first step beyond Uranos or Ymir, essentially unconscious being. Autumbla's licking, the act of generative will, the infraction. Now, before I get to that, I just want to mention the secret of the age of reason. And we see it on the Georgia Guidestones again, the Guidestones to the harvest, right? Georgia linking to Georgikos, meaning farm work or harvest. So the age of reason, that is spoken about from the Georgia Guidestones to the Illuminists' manifesto. Ultimately, there are two ways to interpret it that are non-dual, interestingly, meaning that they coalesce into a singular unified understanding. Firstly, it relates to Huazon, which is a Hebrew word meaning divine will. It's spelt in Hebrew, Huesh, Zadi, Vav, and Nun. However, again, as I've stated, it's Hebrew for divine will, and refers to the emanation of God, the Dewina Mens, or divine mind, the emanation of God or Yahweh. You could look at it in whatever way you want, either the God of this world or the God of all worlds, and of course all time, of that which is the beginning and the end, almost a sort of Abraxian character, by which everything obeys, the noumenon that is omnipresent in all things and is the one that manifests itself through the many, the potential of all things, noumen eris, colloque, redux mirabere, regna, or you will be a divine power, returned from heaven and will admire the kingdoms. Though this is Latin, and stems from Hilarius Varles, it is nevertheless referencing this Gnostic or Kabbalist concept of the Mashiach, and of course that of spiritual involution leading to conscious evolution, that we are all fragments of the divine. We have been returned from heaven because we must purify ourselves, if you will, through this game of the gauntlet, and by knowing ourselves, by admiring the kingdoms, that being the Malkuth, the terrestrial plane, the vivarium that we are entrapped within, the kingdom under the dome, we will then gain self-knowledge. We will gain gnosis experientially. So hence the Creator's will, Huazon, is to be revealed in this new holy empire, that comes from Morals and Dogma, and the conquest of the world, to which this will constitute the rebuilding of a tower, as is customary in each world age. The tower is metaphorical, of course. It's the artificiation of what exists in the heavens. Again, as we've stated, you have these layers of density that comprise the wheel, that comprise the concentric compartmentalized structure of the cosmos. And of course, if you were to look at that, those layers, those concentric layers of density, from a profile view, it would create a vertical spiral leading down, of course, to the world, but it would look like a tower itself. This is what this is referring to. It's an artificial production or construction of what is in heaven, right? So it creates on earth what is in heaven. You could call that idolatry in some sense of the word. In fact, you could define it as idolatry, because that is what idolatry is. You're establishing on earth that which is in heaven. It's a blasphemy, sacrilegious. Or alternatively, it refers to Horus, as in the Ra-son, who is Ra is obviously sun, so who is declared as the bull of heaven, and this emblem is one which heralds the intrinsic force of earthly destruction and renewal. And you even have in renewal the Ra-nu-al, right, or the Ra-nu-el, the sun who is new, El, obviously God, the God who is the sun who is made anew, that idea. So the son of the sun, or the rebirthing of the world through the Ra-set, the reset, Ra-set, of course. Ra, the sun, and Set are both set as necessary evil, essentially. Both of them go into a sojourn into the underworld. Set is the ferryman of the boat. He spears a pep. A pep is this chaos serpent. He is the embodiment of that force, that primordial force of Ymir, Uranus, Kalis, the Ein Sof hour, or just the Ein, really, the Ein Sof, who seeks to bring everything back into nothingness, right? Because the everything is artificial. It's the one that seeks to re-merge the all back into its one essence, right? The dreamer that seeks to wake, the Godhead who is in slumber, who seeks to awaken from his dream of eternality. That is what Set is. Again, ordo ab chao. You create order from chaos because you have to destroy, artificially spear, like what Set does to a Pep, that unconsciousness of being. It's the only way to maintain the world ages, to maintain time, to stop everything from descending back into nothingness. So it's the reset of the sun, or the solar cycle itself. The soul, S-O-U-L, or S-O-L, of course that's the Latin for sun, dash R cycle. What is the R? It's the Hebrew resh. Again we have resh in the raset, rason, and razon. So the resh, from its pictographic or hieroglyphic roots, relates to the head. It's the fifth appendage, it's the fifth element, it's that which, as we see on the Star Tarot card, goes back into the Omega pool. It's that essence of oneself that is the divine fragment, entrapped in matter, constricted, crucified, if you will, like Christ was, by the four elements, right? By the horizontal of the earth and the vertical of the heavenly. Or we could see it as the male and the female, the polarities. The polarity of energies constricts that of the nothingness that embodies the potential of everything. So yes, that's what all of this refers to on the Georgia Guidestones. The Age of Reason itself, that's also tied up with that of the French Revolution. And of course they even worshipped reason. Again, they worshipped the cabalistic concept of raison, the divine will. That was put into place by the Jacobins. The will is expressed through action. So the divine will is in fact referencing Yahweh, the generative aspect of all things. This is why, of course, they have the capstone, the reverse of the Great Seal, which is Saturn. Saturn is divine will. It is timely will, as we were just discussing. Raison, the Age of Reason, is literally the age of Aquarius. It's the age of Saturn. Well, Aquarius was traditionally under Saturn, but it's the age of Saturn. It's the golden age. It's where Uranus destroys all things, a great reset occurs, and a golden age ensues. Or so they believe, right? There'll be a utopia for them and a dystopia for everyone else.
So Ben perceived these consciousnesses as abstract forms that would appear on different levels, and they would communicate with you, and you can learn from them. We saw this on the supercosmic level, then comes the Ankh, the cross, the two triangles, the two crossing, and then something that looks a little bit like the Egyptian pharaoh, the first human form that runs the seventh level. There were 7 levels in all, and each level ever simpler, ever larger, and comprising the levels that were below it. As I said, consciousness is modular. So, as you go through all these levels, finally, you come to a level where all these levels are contained in one sphere, the manifest creation. Everything visible and invisible, everything that ever existed is in it. And around it is this infinite dark void, which is the consciousness itself. And as it vibrates, as we saw before, it creates manifest creation. So as you come closer to this, you begin to discern what appear to be rotating disks covering its surface. And as you look closer, this is what you see. Instead of disks, you see that these are bars having little shapes underneath like that. And these bars spin around. These shapes spin around. And there are 3 layers of these. And the fourth, the outermost layer, looks like this. And you begin to recognize these as shapes known as the Sanskrit letters, and then this one as the symbol which stands for Om, or cosmic consciousness in Sanskrit. So again, you're explained when you ask about it, these are not Sanskrit letters. These are holograms, interference patterns that are active on that level, and they were perceived by the seers and incorporated into the Sanskrit alphabet. So, as you look at this manifest creation, you realize that there must be a consciousness that runs this, the ultimate consciousness. And you want to understand how this structure is run and what's happening with these rotating disks. And you are explained that as this cell, or as this being grows, and we saw that it's constantly expanding and developing and evolving, it expands into the surrounding void, which is pure consciousness, as we remember. So that as it expands into it, the void begins to penetrate it. And these rotating disks are acting as modulators of the void. And by rotating, they create a sound, the word of creation, which then begins to interact within itself. It's a hologram of sound, or a hologram of different frequencies that begin to create all kinds of harmonics and all kinds of additional sounds that develop out of these interactions of different frequencies. And so the whole thing is forever evolving.